Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we've known each other for about 15 seconds, but I have admired your work for 15 years, basically, and I think I want to start by talking about something which no one who's seen your work could miss, which is the importance of the world in the broadest sense and music to your work. And in your relatively early life, you had two very potent experiences, perhaps, or maybe they weren't potent. One is your career unexpectedly as a DJ, one of the few directors, I think, who's gone from DJing into filmmaking, and your traveling experiences as a teenager, I think. I mean, which gave. What effect did those two parts of your life have on your subsequent work?
Well, first of all, good evening, everybody. Very happy to be here. Basically, I think, as you said, I have a better ear than I have to say. I'm much more passionate about music than film, shamelessly, but it's true. I feel that music is the most amazing human expression. It's invisible and unaccountable, and it's not specific. And so I'm in a way, a frustrated musician. And so music has been shaping my life, and obviously the way I see film, at least in terms of even a genre or even in tempo or in rhythm, is dictated by what I consider should be a film. I always before I start shooting a film, I always try to understand what kind of music this will be. I try to understand it as if I will be hearing something. What I will like? Because I'm very articulate in music, but in the film it's a little bit more difficult, it's more complex for me. And I was, the word DJ is kind of wrong because I was a host. So, I was kind of having this 3-hour show in Mexico City, the biggest, most weird anthropological human experiment that you have been in your life, which is great. And I was putting these vinyl things, anything that I wanted, and we were creating a lot of stuff, provocative stuff that I wrote it and I produced with Martin Hernandez, that now is my sound designer of all my films. Since we were 20 years old, we were doing these very provocative things in radio. So radio, in a way, is a great medium for being entertaining people, to be narrative. So 3 hours a day, you have to really get people's ears. And that's a great exercise of really communication, some ideas.
And control to some extent. I mean, in that you can change the way people feel.
Absolutely. And when I was talking, I was playing some background music and then put one thing and then introducing some musician here. And I was playing from classical music to jazz to pop to rock to whatever I was feeling that day. And again, it's a narrative. You have to be shaping some storytelling to grab people's ears and doesn't change. So in a way, it's similar to the film audience, where you have these people and it's like, okay, now tell me what it's about. So it was a great thing that helped me a lot and understand sound, which is 50% of the audiovisual medium that we are, which is film. And then the travels, yes, I think when I was 17, I go into, my family we come from a middle class, my father never had really money, so we never traveled. I was desperate to go out, and at 17 years, I went to a cargo boat, basically washing the floors and things like that. And then we went to all the Mississippi River, and we went to Mobile and Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and then we went down, and then we crossed the Atlantic, we went to Barcelona, all Italy, returned. And then 2 years after, I took the same boat. Now this time my father gave me $1,000. That was a lot for my father and a lot for me. And I just dropped in Bilbao in Spain, and then I lived for 1 year with that money, working in a lot of things. And I went to Africa, to Morocco. And honestly, with no money, but a lot of, at that age, you can do whatever. I was sleeping in the parks and picking grapes in Spain and things like that. And funny enough, just to answer your question, how it shaped, I never understood how much it shaped those trips for me. But until 5 years ago, by some reason, I suddenly realized that after Amores Perros that I did in Mexico City, that was my first film, every other film that I have done, in a way, without knowing it, unconsciously, I have shot in those places that I visited when I was a teenager, in that adventure. So the next film I shot it in Memphis. When I shot 21 grams, it was Memphis. And one of the things that I love Memphis, I could have choose to shoot it in LA or New York, but I want a city that reminds me a little bit of Mexico. And I love the Mississippi River. So I rent a house in the Mississippi, blah, blah, blah. Then I went to Babel and I shot it half of it in Morocco. And then I shoot Beautiful and I shot it in Barcelona. And suddenly somebody told me, have you realized something? I said, wait a minute. And I said, yes, there's a relation. I said, oh my God. But I stupidly didn't realize it until somebody put it to me. And it was clear that I returned as a criminal to the place that you killed somebody. I returned and went to shoot films there. So obviously they have an impact.
Did the ship go to Calgary in Canada?
No, Calgary, I have
so
not. I don't know why.
That's that diversion. Finally, you've broken free.
That was a
the
deliberate
voyage.
decision, and it was more tougher. I think the best decisions are subconscious, I guess, from the instinct. This was kind of, it was needed. You know?
So you talk about music, and I think you have described Amores Perros as rock, Beautiful as a requiem, Birdman as an opera. If there was a musical phrase for The Revenant, what would it be?
I will say it's about silence, which is the best music, I have to say. It's more silent. There's a lot of music, but I always thought that it was a lot of sound of nature, And this film, in a way, has to do much more with dreams and painting than music. I have to say it's more silent painting and music. That's the way I saw it.
I mean, talking now about film, do you remember the first film you saw in a cinema?
My memories is in Mexico there was this cinema that was called the Magic Lantern, and they always have, I don't know in UK the same, but we have something that was called permanencia voluntaria, which means voluntary permanence. Yeah. Do you have it here?
Not anymore, but I think
exactly.
we may.
Not anymore. But in that time you can see films over and over again. So there was this cinema that has this ramp that as a kids we used to. And the ones that I remember clearly, there's I think it's an English film, by the way, Chitty Chitty Bam Bam.
Yeah.
It's a film.
Sort of. American
kind
English.
Of, no, it's American
here,
English, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Chitty Chitty Bam Bam. And I think it's another English film, which was Melody. You remember
yes,
Melody?
Yes,
that I was in love
60s.
with that girl. It was like an 11-year-old kind of love story. So, and it was English too. There was a lot of English films in that time. And so anyway, those kind of my vague memories tell me.
And how old were you?
I will say 6.
Yeah.
Something like
6 is early to see Melody, actually.
Yeah, I think, I was in love with that. That's kind of my memory.
I mean, when people, 6 is very early. I mean, sort of the thing people tend to focus on first is the actors, because that's what you can see, the story, because that's what you're being told. Do you remember a point when the idea that there was a kind of controlling intelligence of what you were watching, that there was a director, basically, occurred to you?
I will say that there was, my mother was born in TV soap operas, but my father has a very good taste of cinema. So it was always the debate. My mother said that the Mexican TV novelas was exquisite acting. My father was absolutely mad about that cheesy comment and an incredible thing. And my father guided me to understand this is a cheesy performance. And I think the film that I remember my father guided me, which suddenly I realized that in some way was Midnight Cowboy. And I think in that time, my father pointed me out that. And then my father showed me the La Dolce Vita. And so I think those two films, in a way, I remember clearly in a way that I felt that there was some voice there, so something that I have never experienced before. And obviously guided by my dad. And I think most of people doesn't know that there's a director. And honestly, I think our work is not to be noticed. Somebody said, oh, what a great shot, what a great director is there. We are terrible at directors.
You're not very good at anonymous shots, I have to tell you. But,
well, but I tried, people will not get distracted by it, But that should be, maybe I'm a bad magician. If the magician is there, it's terrible. But that's when I noticed that there was something that I said, oh, okay, there's something different, And my father was pointing me the acting acting, the performing, the complexity of the Dustin Hoffman character and John Boyd naiveness and how it's corrupted. And so I don't know. Suddenly I felt that there was somebody behind doing that. That it was much more than the classic, obvious films.
A lot of people here may have only made a short film or may have only made a film for television. You began your career doing all those things, working in television, working in commercials, and also, I think, doing short films as well. Taking short films as an example, can you talk about making the transition between something that is 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then embarking on a full-length story?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of people despise commercial, and I can understand why, in some way. Philosophical, in a way, I always kind of struggle doing commercial because it's always for a corporation to sell things and the consumerism, and suddenly my political views start getting into my job. But I enjoy it a lot, and I can immediately realize, I can see how by obviously being in a set and directing a commercial and do these exercises of 1 minute, 30 seconds, or whatever, these short, brief syntaxis of storytelling, or to have always a camera and two actors always teach you something. And I could see clearly that it was giving me craft, not a lot of depth. And it was filling my pockets with money, but it was emptying my soul badly. So that's why I run out, because I was not satisfied. Even when I thought that I was very good, I put a company that we were doing documentaries and commercials and TV. But the craft, I think, is great learning. If you have the capacity to tell a story in 30 seconds, you really develop that narratively, or just the economy way, the most pragmatic way to say something with the close-up, with that, the POV. You understand the language, and obviously to domain a set and know what everybody is doing in this room. So I did a lot of that. I was very lucky because I was a friend of mine that was very young, who was the one who hired me for the radio, who was the owner of the company. His father then promoted him to a channel that it was a very young TV channel, and he asked me to do that. And he knew that I want to be a filmmaker. So basically, a friend and partner of mine, we start writing the ideas, producing them, and shooting them since the beginning. And these ideas were not for toothpaste or Freshmans or cigarette, whatever. It was these corporate ads for the TV, and then we did it for 4 other channels with different kind of people, and they were corporate ads that more than product sell, like corporate image based on emotions like Father's Day and Mother's Day and Christmas and blah blah blah. So they were stories that we were able to do freely and direct it, and we did it in film. And in that time, I remember when we sell it to the owner of the TV, said, we will do that in film. That's our only condition. He said, film? What is that?
16 mil film or
No,
35?
the 35.
Yeah.
35, but the guy, he did TV with video, and obviously was like, what? So anyway, he accepted. And I did hundreds or even, hundreds of commercials in those kind of basic, incredible freedom to do whatever you want, talk about an emotional thing. I learned a lot from that. I have to say, in the moment that I arrived to Amores Perros, I have more. If I will be a pilot, plane pilot, I will have more hours in the air than many other, feature directors.
But also, you used the word a few seconds ago, produce, and by forming your own company, you, right at the beginnings, took charge of the whole process.
Control about it. And then in '95, I wrote a TV pilot. And I have a great idea of doing this Latin American TV series shot in cinema. And I remember in that time, the budget was $100,000. And this guy said, what? And I said, yes, $100,000. He said, I do 1 hour of TV soap operas for $10,000. Why in the hell I would do? So, he was right, economically speaking. But then he financed the pilot of a series that I wrote, and I created a partnership with the 7 other writers, and we did a kind of this workshop that we were writing. We have these beautiful 10 scripts but then didn't play because it was too expensive. He didn't want, and I think it was a great opportunity 20 years ago to have created that in film, blah, blah, blah. But again, and I remember that when I started directing that, my only goal, I was studying theater at the same time because I felt that I need some more depth than to be just a shooter. Because honestly, when you just put the camera, that's, I think, the very easiest way to, I mean, the less important thing to learn, or not less important, I will say, but I will say the easiest knowledge you get is technically it's not a big deal to make a film. I mean, to be honest, like, you know, there's some couple of rules, the wide shot, the medium shot, the over the shoulder, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, it's very basic. That's not the thing, is how to understand the language of it. And it's like the vocabulary is available for everybody, but it's the one who really understands the language and use right the words, you can communicate more clearly, and that's a great writer. And why a great writer is a great writer is if he counts with the same letters than everybody is because the use of those words are more, he has more knowledge to understand the grammatical language and use it clearly to communicate that. So I need that. And so I studied theater 3 years. And while I was doing theater, I remember that my goal was, just if I have just one scene that is good, then I will keep directing. And if not, I will, you know, because I have like 50 minutes. That was the episode, was like 50 minutes. And my only goal was I didn't want to do a great piece. I just want one scene to be believable.
Let's talk for a second about Amores Perez, which is your first film. And although you talk about script and the importance of that being a kind of, you know, in some sense, the perfect document. One of the many extraordinary elements of Amores Perez is physically creating situations that have a kind of unbelievable visceral reality that is not to do with written on the page. And put simply, you can say the dogs fight on in 5 words on a piece of paper, and what you effectively, you know, create out of that, so to speak, idea or instruction is completely not different, but I mean, it's a completely different skill. Speaking as somebody who directed a film called Lassie, I know that dogs don't do anything by accident, and indeed, on some level, require more calculation than almost any other, or animals do, any other form of direction. Can we talk for a minute about how you created those terrifying and incredibly real sequences?
You know, it was the dogs that we got were, I have a dog trainer that was a crazy guy with a lot of dogs, and I wanted this to be real, and he got, in Mexico there's this, I think in UK there's still some underground dog fights, and so I went to see some of them, and they were the most crazy, disgusting things that I have seen in my life, the most cruel, and people, you know, what really is portrayed there is exactly what I saw. So I did my research, so I want these dogs that really can be very, very, very aggressive. So it's to choose the good race that really they are fed by these rages. I mean, they are naturally fighters. And basically what it's, if you see it the way I create it, it's basically by a lot of cuts, obviously, to get the rage. And then the illusion when these guys, you know, just crash and start biting each other. They are not biting each other. I just wrap them with some tooth, you know.
Muzzle.
But invisible, like a fish line.
Yeah, fish wire.
So nobody see it.
Yeah.
But the physicality of them, no matter what, they clash and they try to bite each other. So you in the moment and in the handheld camera, and it's so fast that you don't realize. So through the editing and through that, people swear, and that in New York, I remember like half of the theater went out because they were so pissed off of me. And, but actually, it was a film trick.
One of the sort of, I think, unsung relationships in directing is the relationship between the director and the animal trainer, in that animal trainers have a kind of impossible job. The script says, you know, the dog jumps out of the window and runs along the street, and the animal trainer says, yeah, I can do that, and lives in a world where he knows someone's going to turn around and say, why isn't it jumping out of the window like you promised? And so they're in some senses afraid of the director because they think he's going to be unreasonable. And so the key relationship is to make the trainer trust that you're not going to, in effect, betray their relationship with the animal. Was that something that you had to, your relationship with the trainer, was that something that you thought about?
No, this guy was really good. I mean, I think he delivered what he promised. You know, I think I have to say that even the bad guy in the film, like this guy that has this blonde, there's this guy that is obviously the antagonist of Gael, and he's like a blonde guy, and he's the champion of the dogs kind of thing. He actually was a very mellow, super sensitive guy. That when I met him, he was a little chubby and blah, blah, and then he just get fit himself, and he just got his hair like that, and he had a phobia for dogs, like really panic. So through that animal trainer, he helped me to train him to start getting comfortable with dogs. And believe me, with those dogs, you never get comfortable because you know that they are assassins. And so he was getting kind of used to them and to appear like he was super cool with the dogs and blah, blah. And once I remember this anecdote that we were shooting one of the dog fights, and the dog, by some strange reason, began to not like the situation, and he grabbed it like that. And the problem is that the dog tried to get his arm doing that, so he started, going around him. But there was a moment that the dog was so furious that become like a here, and then the trainer said, "Get him to the wall." So he get it to the wall, and the dog start climbing in the dog, like literally like an evil spirit. And the dog was climbing the thing, and I was like, everybody was shocked. So the trainer again said, "Everybody out," because that dog go out and it kills somebody. And the guy was so brave that he was still standing there just seeing the scene, and then the guy just took it and controlled the situation. But what I'm saying is the guy was really, really in control. So, I mean, it was a guy that delivered the whole thing, and I felt safe all the time.
But obviously the vividness of the physical camera style makes it almost unendurably real to look at.
Yeah, the handheld is always like, I don't know, I feel like a little shamed, like so out of focus and everything is a mess. But it's always
so exciting helps. As well. You must.
It helps. It helps always the handheld camera. It's helped to get that urgency kind of thing.
Yeah. You know? No, I mean, we'll move on because we've got a lot to get through. But just one of the many striking things about Maurice Perez is something which I would say on some level reappears in everything you've ever done, which is the fragility of family relationships and the ease with which they can collapse. The vagrant who's lost his daughter, the brother who's in love with his brother's wife, and every family relationship, in some respect that you present, seems on some level to be on a kind of knife edge. Is that something that you consciously find, or?
Well, isn't it true? Mm-hmm. I think every family, unfortunately, is bloodlines are the most, I will say, what define people's lives, and want it or not, unfortunately, we are a family clan, works with different kind of rules, and the rules can sometimes not satisfy everybody, and there's like the human relations imply, dealing with difficulty and problems and different points of view, or disease or accidents or things that fracture the thing and finish endly. We are just like little cells that we're together, and then we have to go through that. So in a way, I think that what define for me is the drama that really is the most fascinating drama of all, the one that comes from the bloodline, It's biblical and it's true, and is what really ties much more empathy for me in films, in a way.
I'm going to move to Babel, which obviously very much concerns a different group of families who are united by a single incident, a bullet being fired in error into a bus. And one of the kind of many things that are so astonishing about that film is the level of intimacy, in effect, that the audience feel with the different groups of characters, whether it's Kate Blanchett kind of fumblingly rediscovering a portion of her marital relationship while peeing into a frying pan, the girl in Tokyo being hugged by the police officer, those minuscule moments that expose people. What I think is extraordinary to watch is how you do achieve the same kind of level of intimacy with such a disparate group of people, ranging from, in that instance, a child, a teenager, a Hollywood star, and the Moroccan cast, but all of them giving that. Can you just talk for a moment about how you create the space in which people can be that exposing about themselves?
Well, I think the biggest challenge as a director we all have, or at least I have, I'm very conscious about how delicate it is, and almost 80% of the work rely on to cast the right people. I think when you cast somebody wrong, there's no way to save it, and it's not because of you or because of him. It's because you did or because the script was not good. If you do that work wrong, you are absolutely screwed. There's nothing to do. If you do it right, I think I consider that my job is almost done in that territory, and then I have to use to really get the objective of each scene very clear, to help him or her to understand what the actors or the character really is wanting, what he or she wishes in this moment, and how it will be done, how he will get that. So if I'm clear on that, I know things will go well. I think that problem is what I have seen so many times is that sometimes the language that you use can be a radioactive element that can explode everything potentially to disaster if you haven't done your work properly and you are not clear. Then you can easily get the actors to a cycle of hell that then there's no way out. And so for me it's very important to do my job well, to cast based on not only the physicality of the person, that it is like the good age or the good kind of people, but I always try to see in the actors, when I meet with them, like there has to be some interior life, some emotional baggage that I can see in people. And normally that's the people that I like in life. Because there's actors or actresses that can be very impressive craftsmanships. But I'm not interested in the craft, because the craft, again, is the easiest thing that anybody can do. Not anybody, but many people can. You can learn the craft. The craft is the less important thing, but is what sustained that craft. And what that sustained that craft will be obviously their personal, emotional baggage of their interior life, that I call it. There's something there that feels, there's a weight. And is that energy or weight, in a way, it's according to the characters that I think, then I know that they will deliver. And then secondly is the craft of me choosing the language to get them to know exactly what I want. And then I'm sure that they will get it. And in that sense, then you can do any scene that you want, and very intimate, emotional, or a very hilarious one, or whatever the reason you choose him.
I mean, I could take you through every scene in the film and ask you the same question, but I'm going to pick two where language is still powerful, but is not as simple, and they both involve children. The scene where the nanny, the carer, leaves the two children in the bush and says, "Stay here. I'm going to go and I'll go and find help." And the scene where the father interrogates the boy and slaps him, kind of brutally, not brutally, but fiercely across the face, where you're dealing with obviously a very smart group of young actors, but the language alone. Is that the key tool of making those scenes?
Well, in terms of the actors to get it, yes, I think. With the kids in the Moroccan side, all these actors were non-actors. They were really, really humble people from very remote villages, and they were shepherds, literally, and most of them hasn't seen a camera. So it took a lot of time to rehearse, to play games, to discover their emotions that they didn't know how to brand them or how to call them. I remember, just to put an example, you will not see it here, but there's a babble. There's a guy that is the guy who basically is an old guy that was interrogated by the police, and he was brutally put because he was the one who received the rifle from the Japanese guy, and he was interrogated. And that guy has a beautiful face, like this biblical face from the beginning of men, very tough face. But he has to cry. And the moment has to be fragile and vulnerable and scared and fear and anyway, when I was talking to him, I cast him because the face and his eyes were beautiful, but then we were trying to get him to get some emotional stuff. So I was talking to him what was the most emotional thing, or when he was rage, he was mad about something. And when he laughed, you see his face, he was like that. And then when he laughed, he didn't have two teeth. So, so it was like a kid. It was like the most naive person that, so you will swear that guy is like a terrorist. They will put it in the newspaper, you will say this is the most worst man in the world. But he was actually the most beautiful soul. And when I was trying to bring him some memories of, well, have you been mad with your brother? No. Have you been mad with her? No. What was the saddest day? And always he was the salam alaikum, and he was the most generous, poor guy. And he was literally a pure soul. And I couldn't get from him any emotional baggage to get it, that I was super scared. So when we were shooting, I have this incredible collaborator, which was a Palestinian actress, Hiam Abbas. Is a beautiful actress, and she was my translator. She spoke Arab, and she was great. I think it was my angel. And we were just about to shoot, and this guy couldn't come with something. And literally, I couldn't get into that. And it was my mistake for casting him just for visual reasons. But I never, and his eyes were amazing, but I never, it was not a professional actor. And when you choose non-professional actors, then there's a third filter, that is you have to rehearse with them and make sure that they can do it. I didn't. And I was paying the consequences, and then he said to him, well, what about your mother? And he said, my mother died. And I said, well, when she was died, blah, blah. And so we began to interrogate him. It was horrible. It was like an interrogation, trying to dig some sadness to make him cry. And suddenly he confessed that the day she died, she didn't go to the grave because his brother, blah, blah. So there was a personal story. And he suddenly breaks. And you see this 60-year-old man start crying. And I didn't know if I should hug him or roll camera. And I said, okay, both. Rodrigo, roll camera. And we start rolling camera. And we did a couple of takes. And the guy kept crying for 2 hours. It was inconsolable. And so all of the crew were crying. It was incredible how but you have to dig the well to bring water. But that's an example that's a very extreme example of how to work with actors in that sense. And then, as you said, the language of you with them, and then the cinematic language too, I think helps a lot.
The clip where Kate Blanchett, who has just been shot, gets stitches put into her by the doctor in the village that they've taken her to.
Well, the funny thing in this scene, I can take many anecdotes. One anecdote is that the guy, in the story, they are stitching Kate, and obviously in this humble town, and the guy who does it, actually he's a veterinarian, and in the story he's a veterinarian. He's a guy that deals with animals, but that's the only guy that can stitch the wound. And actually this guy was, and when he arrived to the set, so we rehearsed many times. And it's very difficult to rehearse this with Brad Pitt, with Kate Blanchett, and then a shepherd from this village that, he don't know basically who is Brad, who is that, he don't care. But when he arrived, his fingers and everything smelled, I don't know what parts of the animal he touched, but it was really bad. But he was so lovely and sweaty, I didn't have to make it. He's just a shepherd for that, it's exactly that. But so we rehearsed a couple of times. But anyway, I was explaining to him, okay, and thanks God this was just the classic, different setups that I can hide in editing. Because I mean, if I would have done this film in the Birdman mode, I will be still there. So what I'm saying is, I was saying, okay, I will put the camera here. So when Brad said to you, "Where is the clinic?" You have to just say in Arabic, "She will die," for example. So okay, ready? Okay, ready. So Kate, action. And Kate start giving everything as every take. And Brad, "Where is the clinic?" And the guy just looked to the camera and smiled. No, wait. Wait, no, you have to talk to him, not to the camera. Okay, one more time. And Kate, and Kate really giving everything, said, "Brad, where is the clinic?" And the guy, no, oh God. I swear it was like 70 times. O sea, to this guy, and Kate gave 70 times the take.
I'm going to have to move on and briefly to Birdman. As part of my obviously very thin research for this conversation, I tried to get hold of Peter Cohn last night, who was the first AD on Birdman, who I've worked with as the first AD too, who's one of the world's great human beings. And I said, tell me something to ask. He sent his love. And he was shooting, and he said, I can't really talk now because I'm in the middle of shooting. And then late last night, he sent me this. And I said, what is it? He said, I had to keep a diary in order to explain to people why we started shooting so late every day. And I always haven't got time to read the whole thing out, but it says 7 a.m. call, 8 o'clock, Michael and Aggie, 8:30, Michael travels, rehearsal, 9:10, end rehearsal, 9:50, 5-minute warning, 9:55, ready, 10:10, Aggie, 10:30, rehearse with 12mm lens, 10:45, change to 10mm lens, rehearse again, 11:45, roll on 10mm lens. Then it says abandon, exclamation mark, thinking. What I mean by that is that I think European directors, particularly us in England, find that rehearsal is something we have to squeeze into corners of the day, that it's almost a piratical process that isn't really allowed, and it's done out of school in literally seconds in corridors, and can we just have 2 minutes to talk about this? I think more than anybody I've ever talked about, the process of rehearsal, the process of preparation, the process of unpicking what could go wrong, what could go right before you actually shoot, is something you take obviously immensely seriously. And we're now going to watch a shot which is in every sense literally extraordinary, and perhaps stretch that beyond any others. So we start with him. Michael Keaton is performing, as you all I'm sure know, he's performing a play on Broadway. He goes out for a 5-second break, gets locked out of the theatre in his underpants, and has no alternative but to run around to the front of the theatre and go into the foyer and back onto the stage. How many setups is there?
Very few.
Okay.
Very few.
Meaning 4, 8?
No, from the door to the 2.
2. Okay. So how do you begin to rehearse a shot like that?
We walk in every scene was absolutely rehearsed in the day, but months in advance. So we start pre-production. You know, I think it's something that I got from theater. I have this theater teacher that was Ludwig Margules, was a Polish guy doing theater in Mexico, very kind of minimalistic, radical theater, but he was, I think was the guy who really put on my shoulders what really means to be a director in terms of the responsibility that one has. You know, before I didn't understand exactly what was. It was to shoot, how to shoot, or how to make cool shots, or I was not clear what was. And I think during the theater thing, you know, he was the one who told me, you need to know more than the DP about light and about technique and about more. You have to know about architecture, and you have to know about painting, and you have to know about music, and you have to know about dance. In order, if you want to direct a bunch of guys and not be eaten alive, you will have to really go into this, and you will have to know what the actors are going through. And he was, you know, it was a very good kind of responsibility in the shoulders to understand that I need to understand much more than anybody what I'm doing. And it's not that I know everything. No, it's just to learn with everybody what we will be doing. So I understood that, and I think that was very helpful. And in this one, yes, we worked with Michael, and we studied a lot at what time we will be rehearsing, we'll be shooting this scene. And Times Square can be very tricky because obviously it's full of tourists and a lot of shit. And I said, well, if Michael, in his underwear come here, it will be a disaster because everybody will be looking at the camera, everybody will be looking at him. Actually, he will really become exactly what that film. I mean, somebody will have a YouTube and blah, blah. So it was logistically, so I run with Michael, I show him where is gonna be the thing. He said, okay, I will give you 3-4 times. And I said, that's enough, Carlos. I mean, you don't have to give me more. We rehearse with what I do normally with Chivo and we rehearse with an extra, with a stand-in. We know exactly how we're gonna do it, what angles, where the camera. Then with Peter Cohn, we bring some extras just to understand where the extras will be, when they block things, when blah, 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 blah. And, but it was my big fear was how I gonna control the crowd because there was no budget. And in that time, Spider-Man was shooting the film and they recreate in a set the whole Times Square Plaza. And I was thinking, what about if they allow me to shoot there? But they didn't, obviously, and thanks God. So once I was walking with Chivo going to lunch on Saturday in New York, and I saw this band, these black kids playing in this beautiful band. And I said, wow, that's super cool. These kids were dancing and playing this thing. And I got the idea, I said, what about, obviously the film was already, only drums was about the music. And I said, another kind of drums, but now let's put them in the center of Times Square. Let's create our own show for the tourists to be distracted. And that will get us along. And it was, honestly, I was very proud. It was a brilliant plan because then we put it there and they were playing so cool that most of the tourists were distracted by these guys while we were getting away with our 100 extras. And that was it, so that's the way we did it.
And how many nights did you shoot that?
One.
One.
We did maybe 6 takes, and that's it.
So, and the theater audience is?
Yes, and then what we did is that we knew that we will be finishing at one time, and then obviously there's the second stitch there.
Yeah. And did you pick a time of night? I mean, did you do it like later?
It was like because if I was scared that if we went too early, it would be too crowded. If we went a little bit later than 11:30, it began to get a little bit sad. So, I mean, it's not as exciting. So we started shooting at 8, and I think by 10 we were done. Yeah.
That is the most intimidating anecdote I think I've ever heard. All right, listen, I have to pedal along a bit here because I'm way behind. So we're going to talk about The Revenant now, which is your new film, which is in every sense an astonishing film. When I was a very young director, I did my first film, which was a very, very long film. It's shot for 52 weeks, and in the middle of the 52 weeks, you start to think, nothing you've done is any good at all. In my case, perhaps more accurately than yours. It was 1980, and Coppola had just been shooting Apocalypse Now, and Eleanor Coppola, his wife, wrote a book called Notes. And this book is a diary kept by Eleanor Coppola, subsequently made into a documentary. And I used to read it at night. And every chapter would end with, I'm really worried about the children's maths. Frances is downstairs crying. And you'd turn the page and thinking, what's he going to do now? And then she'd be on to another topic, and you'd miss whether or not he'd cleared tears. And famously, the set blew over, and it was a film which had incredible physical problems of shooting. Did you ever cry in the course of making The Revenant?
No, I don't remember crying. Wish I should cry. I think it would have been more healthy, probably. No, it was just an immense amount of problem-solving thing under incredible tough conditions for a long period of time, and that was it. So, I mean, I have to say that I feel kind of a little, it's not fair to complain of what we do. We are so lucky to do what we are doing and privileged. So sometimes when I caught myself complaining, I feel like a coward, like an ungrateful guy. Under the circumstances the world are going, and you see all these immigrants without work and families, and that's tough. Or to make a building as a worker or a farmer, that's tough job. To complain about what we do, it's a little bit. I feel like a shame. So it was tough. Of course, it was extremely tough. Emotionally drained, because you are, as you know, and you all know, that directing includes getting taking 80 decisions or 800 decisions per hour, and for that amount of time, and every decision was tougher than the other one. So it was exhausted. That's what it was, an exhausting experience. But it worth it. It worth it. I learned that I will never do a film in the nature again. That's a great lesson, because I think that nature will win, and I don't like to lose.
But in tackling something which clearly from the very beginning one recognized, when you knew you had incredible challenges, one can't help thinking that, and this is obviously true of Birdman too in a way, that you insert a very difficult idea into the middle of an already difficult task. In the case of Birdman, a single shot, which obviously places a whole layer of complexity on it, and in the case of The Revenant, shooting largely sequentially. A decision which is much clearer when one's seen the film than before one's seen the film, because clearly the way the story and the landscape develop, there's a naturalness to that decision, but there's also a kind of absoluteness, if it's true, that you put on top of an already hugely challenging event. Is that something that you wrestle about, or that you...
The long takes?
Yeah. No, I was thinking of the shooting in sequence.
Yeah, funny enough, I have always shot in sequence all my films,
right,
since Amores Perros, and that maybe has to do with some, honestly, incapacity of myself to make it differently. I don't understand how directors can do like the middle part in the beginning of the shooting and then the end in the middle, and because the locations require that. So I recognize myself that is an inability that I have to my brain to work that way. I can't. That's one thing, because I need to understand how it's growing. And since Amores Perros, I don't know why I was clearing that, because I have never done a feature, but I remember that it cost in that time like $2.5 million, and it was a fortune for a Mexican film. And I remember that I complained, saying I'm not investing in anything but in time. So I mean, this is my, I don't care about special effects, but in emotional effects. And if this film doesn't work emotionally, it will not work. And for me, it's to shoot a film chronologically, if possible, allows the director to grow with the film, to understand the film, and to, in the moment that you make decisions or you discover, there's a moment that the films, all of the films that I have done, take a form in itself. So I mean, suddenly you are goth of your work at the beginning, and then you become a creature of it, and you have to know when that transition comes, and you have to surrender to that and not resist that, and not control with previous preconceptions. But there's something that the actors bring, that the films start bringing, that, and especially in long shots, shooting films like Babel was 1 year around the world, that when you are putting the things together, you become another person actually in 1 year. You are a very different person under the pressure you are, separating from your wife or family, friends, isolated. You go into a very state of meditational kind of thing, that you become a different person, and you begin to understand the depth of things that in the beginning appear as a foreground, but then you see the background of things. So to have the ability to say, I thought this was like that, but now that she brings that, and that scene get me this thing, that maybe I can sip this here for this event to be much more solid here. So maybe you can change and rewrite things, or not do things the way you thought it, because now it's going to be better. So that's a luxury. So I mean, that's really the ability as a sculptor to be finding the shape, and not you to commit with the shape that is already there without the opportunity to do that. So I think it's a great luxury, but I think it's worth it.
So, for example, in Birdman, the hospital scene was the last day's shooting. Was it?
Just for example, to put you an example, the ending was absolutely a different ending, and it was a terrible ending. This film will never.
This is Birdman.
Birdman.
Yeah.
It was a terrible ending, and in the middle of the shoot, and that was a very short shoot. It was 29 days. In the middle, I realized that the film, it will be a disaster to shoot the ending that we have. And I started rewriting the ending, and I found it as I was doing it, because the film started speaking me itself, and I have the super beautiful opportunity to look for it, found it, and then put it in the right time in the last day of shooting. And we didn't have even money because we did it in a set. But we didn't have the money so we were trying to do it in a location, but it was impossible. It will be a disaster. So anyway, I have the time to write it and to design something that was in the budget realms, fight for anyway, what I'm saying is that's an example of if I will have shot the film, let's say, because we were near the hospital and the producer said, no, you have to get it there, and the second week you shoot the ending because it will be costly effective, I will have screwed the film.
Just very quickly, you used the word fight there. How many people did you have to convince that you'd found the new ending?
Not many. I would say the Fox Searchlight and New Regency. They were sensitive. I think they were supportive in that sense. I can't complain about. But yeah, you have to make a case to how you want to spend the money, blah blah blah. And they were scared about the ending because it was ambiguous. It was a little bit like, but wait a minute, if he dies or doesn't know? I said, well, I think it has to be as many endings as people in the theater. No, but that's dangerous. Because I said, well, that's how I would like to. And they will have to swallow. I have final cut. But it was scary for them.
Have you always had final cut, sort of quickly on that?
Yeah.
And that's something that you managed to maintain from the beginning?
Yeah, fortunately, yes. But anyway, that's a good example of how things can change radically.
Going back to The Revenant, because again, there are so many things to talk about there, but essentially, I think you used, again, the bulk of the hours of the day to physically rehearse, and used a particular time of day, magic hour, so to speak, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, to shoot most of the film. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in the winter light, it's dark at 3 o'clock. So we were basically traveling 2 hours from Calgary. Then makeup and wardrobe take another 2 hours or more. So no matter how early we wake up, we will be ready until 11, something like that. And then obviously, we have rehearsed those scenes before, obviously. Every scene was rehearsed in advance. But in the day of the shooting, then we rehearse again, and once the whole thing was set up, we wait for the light, and then we will have, always 2-3 shots to make sure that it was. So what I found about this technique is that you have the benefit of the rehearsal to meticulously know what you are doing, and every actor know exactly step by step, like a theater play, literally. And every crew member participating in these 14 millimeters lenses, 180 degree, and everybody running around the camera, and everybody knows when they have to do that. But then, because you know that there is only one take that is so long and it's only 1 or 2 opportunities, there's adrenaline, and there's fear, and there's awareness. And that makes the actors really alive, and really devote and concentrate. So you have both of the best worlds. Mm-hmm. You have the craft, the rehearse, the knowledge, that you have explored all the best things, but you have the aliveness of the fear that give you a theater play. So honestly, I found that that's a very beneficial thing.
And that very first, what you say, we first rehearsed months in advance, is that in a room? Is that sort of when you've got something?
No, we went to the locations because we have to find technically what we will be using there. If there was a crane, if there was a steady cam, if it will be handheld, to see the actors' feet, to see where the equipment will come, So we went into that, and in order that the actors to feel comfortable to play with whatever tree here or whatever, just that they understand the terrain, and then we know exactly, and we mark the locations 3 months in advance, and then we have to prepare them the access and that. So it was, little flags waiting for us 3 months in advance. There was something like, for example, the 4th scenes we have to rehearse in the office. And then we put some tapes or some curtains to pretend, and based on that, as Birdman, we rehearse everything in storage with curtains, and then we rehearse step by step how many steps Michael had, and then we design the set on those kind of things. So it's
so rehearse first, set design afterwards.
Exactly.
Okay.
So with Jack Fish was there, so we said, okay, this is the bar where Captain Henry and this will discuss how we're gonna light it. Okay, with this, but the windows should be this measure. She was saying this again. I will, we design, okay, the table here. So it was a pre-designed film. There is no, we didn't capture nothing like, okay, now let's shoot it. No, everything was, every window, everything was absolutely pre-designed.
But the extraordinary thing, and there's so many extraordinary things that it's impossible to list them. But the first Native American attack on the trappers. I've only seen the film once, so I'm sure I won't get the shot exactly right. But it either starts, or certainly the fall from the arrow, the fall from the tree up onto the horseman. It then seems to go for about 150 yards with the horseman, and then go somewhere. I mean, what you create there. I mean, whereas in Birdman you have a kind of operatic enjoyment of the continuousness of the shot. In Revenant, you're looking at shots which you don't think of as continuous, but you just feel that there's no part of the world that you're not able to look at. Basically, I mean, it has a kind of seamless energy into it, but bluntly, that shot looks impossible to do. And how did you do it?
Well, it was, again, a lot of rehearsal, I started planning this shot like 5 years ago. Conceptually, I knew that I want to make an attack in one shot. And the reason was to get into the state of mind and in the shoes of one guy living that. And again, not fragmented in a way that we can just cover objectively seeing people, suffering or being shot or that, but I want how it will have feel in those times to be in the middle of all these things. And I wanted to introduce the characters through their point of view. So first I go with Leo, and then I go to the elk dog, and then I go to Fitzgerald's point of view. Then it's kind of a ghost of the history, kind of nobody there floating, kind of the music kind of goes into, dominating the scene with everything is kind of silent. And then we go again with Hardy, and then all the trappers, and then go to Sky, and then I go to the Indians and crying. So for me, it was a way to say, okay, how I can navigate and introduce the characters through this battle and understand what they were doing and how they are feeling and how it felt to be them in the middle. So I have this thing before, then we storyboard piece by piece. We did a storyboard, and then the most difficult thing was to find a physical place to really serve all the technicalities of horses running, the river there, the river, if there's a boat that can be there, the seasons that, because the water go down and up, so to find the right season, that the river has the right flow, for that boat to be there. So it was a nightmare. We look for many places in the world. So we found that place and we commit to that, and then we start months before, like with stunts and extras and designing, shot by shot. We start here, okay, let's plant 3 trees here, we will paint this, we will come here, okay. So we are designing nature and playing with what we have and making the things. And so you have chunks, okay, now here, how are we gonna go from the Indian here and go to the horse? Okay, how are we gonna solve that technically? What machine, what?
How did you?
Yeah,
it looks impossible.
Yes, it looks impossible. It was almost impossible. It was very tough. It wasn't a stitch, but it was extremely difficult.
The change of speed is the thing that is.
Yes, and then we went into a little crane that helped us to really be basically going and jump to this guy and stitch them, and then go with the with the little motor horse kind of thing. So I mean, it's boring all that, but it was technically very, very challenging to do, but fun. So it's like equations.
Yeah.
Everything is like equations, and then try it and fail and try it and fail until we find it, and it's exciting. Say, okay, I think it will work. God bless us, and then okay, go, and then, so piece by piece you are going into things, and it's great. It's great. It's just challenging. It just takes a lot of time.
Amazing. I've like stolen most of your time. I'm going to ask for 3 questions in a moment. My last question is just going to be this: that we talked a lot about the brilliant sort of technical aspects of this. The Remnants is the first. Is it the first time you've done a story that's based on the truth, on some?
Well, it's there's a novel, but François Truffaut said something that I really like. That he said, like, an honest adaptation is betrayal. And it's true. When you get a book, if you don't betray the book, then you will end up a very bad book version. The film is fed by images and other tools. That literacy is another medium that needs other things. So honestly, what it's survive from the book is just the title and the bear attack and the fact that he returned, because that's what really is historically known from this character. Yeah. All what is known of Glass before, after, nobody knows. It's a guy that is building legendary kind of thing, but nothing is factual. So most of the element marks me, then I really make it. The fact that he had all the relation with the son, that he was a mixed race, the love story with the wife that he lost and that is guiding him as a ghost in the forest, and the filial relation, and the elk dog, the Indian chef looking for her daughter. All those things were the relation with Bridger and Fitzgerald. All of those are fictional, absolutely, and there are completely the cinematic versions. I mean, there's no resonance with the novel.
And it fits extraordinarily into, one of perhaps the strongest themes in all your work, which is that although on the surface there's an element of kind of coincidence and chaos in the way we live our lives, within that there are moments of incredibly consequential actions. Glass is not accidental, but his act of kindness to the girl is what eventually saves his life, in the same way that in almost every film you do, small actions have enormously kind of powerful consequences in people's lives. I'm going to open it to the audience now very briefly, but there is a drink afterwards and there might be a chance to ask a question then. That is my excuse, and I apologise for stealing your time. So who would like to ask a question? Up there on the left.
It was just a quick question about writing and directing, and in terms of the work you've done, you've written a lot of the things. What have been some of the advantages you found?
I think that the writing process is in a way is the notion of the film, but it's not the film. It's and I think it's the time for when you are involved in the writing process, in a way you understand the things deeper. I think, and then you have the ability to change it with some certain knowledge of the consequences, because every change can trigger enormous consequences that you don't even understand. That's why, because every script is it's a piece of, it's like, it seems like a collage, but it's not. Everything is tied to one reason. Or a good script, let's say, when you work and said, okay, this scene has a reason for being, this scene is about this, so everything has a reason. And every time that sometimes when people that doesn't know, studios or executives or whatever, take out one scene because there's no money or whatever, they think that it's very easy to do that, as if the script will be, and it's not. I mean, everything is for a reason. Sometimes when you arrive to the editing room, you can take out a lot of scenes out that you discover that they were not needed, but they were needed in the moment of the writing to understand you and the actors, to understand who this guy was. And maybe when you accomplish the shooting and the images are, they take power and they suddenly speak much louder than you thought, then you can take out the scenes. I said, it's not needed, but it's better to have it, because I'm sure that those scenes you will never shot that way if you didn't have those delete scenes. So what I'm saying is the knowledge of the writing give you the opportunity to be changing things, knowing what is the consequences and the possible potential benefits of it.
Two
that
more.
give you a lot of power.
Sorry. Two more quick questions. It's a kind of notional democratic part of the evening, but who would like to ask a question? This side here, yeah.
You touched briefly on storyboarding, and I just wondered, seeing as so many of your films are so powerfully visual, I just wondered how much the storyboarding process for you in kind of creatively brings about the writing process.
I think just the action scenes. I have never been a storyboard guy, but I always storyboard the technical, delicate scenes like the action, car chase or, those action scenes, because they will involve some probably special effects, and they are so expensive that you really don't need to know where the camera has to be shot or what will be more effective. So to in a way pre-visualize that, I think is very helpful. So only those ones, not the whole film.
And the last question is up there.
Going back to the writing, you've had several co-writers, and I'm very curious, given the personal vision that's so powerful, how much the co-writers are involved from the outset.
Yeah, well, I think one of the most fun part for me is always the co-writing process is the most healthy. I don't visualize myself as a lonely writer. I can't, actually. I always need somebody to really interchange ideas, because even when I bring the subject or the story or I'm interested, when I have a partner writer who in a way we share a vision or a mission, or we have affinity in our sensibilities, I like to pinpoint, to brainstorm ideas that I need to be confronted, and my process is very, in a way, uncertain. So I'm not a certain artist that said this is a great line or this is a great scene. I always question myself. I always said this will be really the best. I have a kind of a disease that is like a chronic dissatisfaction disease, which I'm never happy about it. So I need to say, is this really shit? And I need somebody to encourage me and say, no, it's great. Are you sure? Yes. Or when I said the shitty things, I need somebody to say, it's really a shit. What we can do better. Yes, right, you are right, it's shit. Or I have to be said, it's a shit for me to defend myself. And say, why you think it's shit? And I said, no, I don't think. And then I convinced him that it's not a piece of shit, because then I found a reason why I defended, and then I discovered why I want that piece of shit in my film. But in a way, that's a very healthy thing for me, because when you have a great partner, a bad idea can become a beautiful thing. So I think for me, maybe the Burnout was one of the most fun parts for me. We laugh a lot, we create a lot. And that doesn't mean that you are losing your vision. Your vision will be impregnated no matter what. Every director, even if it's not your, and that's the eternal fight with writers, right? Screenplay writers sometimes are very sensitive with that. But I always said that even if a screenplay write is not yours, when you direct it, it's yours. Because no matter what, a film contains 30,000 decisions that it will reflect the director's vision of the world. And every word can be interpreted and direct in 100,000 times, and that way it will reflect the spirit and the personality and the voice of somebody that is taking those decisions, since the color of the dress of the girl, the face of the guy, the color of the department, the position of the camera, the time that camera was suspended there, the silence that was made, the accents. Everything, it speaks so highly about who you are, as much as when you go into the car of a friend and you hear his terrible music, you know that that's his soul. And that music reflects who he is. So the film, in a way, reflects who you are, no matter if it's not yours, then you make it yours in that. So anyway, what I'm saying is there is no risk to play the role. It's just to be confronted and sharing the creative process of writing, which again is a notion of the film. That is not the film, it's just the conception of it. So for me, it has been fun. Now, there's writers or directors that doesn't work for them. They really need to be isolated in that, but I'm not like that.
We have to draw this to a close. Can I ask one last question, which is there any single piece of advice either that you were given or that you would give to directors that kind of...
Never make a film in winter with horses. take that for your life.
On that note, and can we all say, it is great. Can I thank Alejandro for being so kind as to spend time with us in his very busy schedule. So thank you very much for being with us. It's been a huge privilege and really brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you very much.